Hello and welcome to the 2021 Ohioana Book Festival. My name is Daniel Best. I'm pleased to welcome you to the panel of Danger and Intrigue. First, we'd like to thank our festival sponsors and partners, all of whom you can find listed on the Ohioana website. And thanks to our official bookseller, The Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all the books featured at the festival by going online to bookloft.com. And now I'm pleased to welcome our authors. We have Steve Goble, whose settings range from rural Ohio to the 18th century pirate ships, in his new novel, City Problems, an Ed Runyon mystery. He's also the acclaimed author of Spider John mystery series. Hello, Steve.
Hi, and it's Goble, by the way. But
Goble. Thank you very much for that.
no problem. I get that.
Next up, we have Janet Irvin, Janet J.E. Irvin. Prior to retiring to write full-time, Janet served as the chair of the International Language Department at Springsboro High School, where she taught Spanish and English. And she also taught Spanish at Wright State University. She also wrote spec scripts for a cable television network on mental health issues. Her featured novel is A Principle of Life. Welcome, J.E.
Thanks, Dan.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Kylie Logan. This is her first of 9 different pen names. She spends her free time stalking through cemeteries, and I'm sure that generates a lot of different mysteries and thriller ideas. Her premiere novel is The Secret of Bones. Hello, Kylie, how are you doing?
Good, how are you? Welcome to the Ohioana Book Festival.
Thank you very much, Kylie. Next, we have Michael Prelee. Did I say that right, Mike?
Prelee.
Oh my goodness. Yep. I am messing up everything.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah. He's an expert on how to sell your books outside of book festivals, which is something that we all can relate to in this pandemic time. And his premier book for the Ohioana Book Festival is The Lost Little Sister. Hello, Mike. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And last but not least, we have Miss Jessica Strawser. She is the editor at large for Writer's Digest. And she and I have the same belief that if you put French fries on top of salads, the world will be a better place. And her premiere novel is A Million Reasons Why. Hello, Jess, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, thank you everyone in attendance for attending this virtual book festival. So now we're gonna start off nice and light. And my first question to anyone who would like to answer is, what is the meaning of life when you're writing so often about death? I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. That's not a light way to start the conversation. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so my actual first question is, when did you first discover that you like to write mysteries, suspenses, or thrillers? And anyone who would like to take it, we can go ahead and start.
Go ahead.
Anna, you first.
Okay, well, I will tell you that I always loved them. And the very first book that I read approximately 20 times from the library was The Mystery of Camp Laughing Water. I was in 5th grade, and I was totally entranced with the idea of the mystery that kept unspooling in this story. In 7th grade, someone dared me, said I could not read the entire collection of Sherlock Holmes stories in a month. Well, that wasn't a safe dare because I did it in less than a month and I was totally hooked. And so I always thought that's the direction I would go when I started writing.
Nice. Writing on a bet is a good way to start. So I'm happy to hear you got through the Sherlock mysteries in less than a month. Steve?
Yeah, Sherlock got me into it too. When I was in elementary school, our library had a paperback copy of Hound of the Baskervilles. And it had this glorious, lurid cover on it with this haunted demon dog and foggy moors behind it. I read that book and just absolutely, totally fell in love and decided mysteries were going to be a thing for me for the rest of my life. And that's how it was. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. My next question is, how does popular culture factor into anyone's writing?
I could take that if you'd like.
Absolutely.
I started out writing science fiction. I decided I wanted to write like a crime thriller, and I started to look around, and I remembered there was an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, and they had a segment that covered a case in Ohio called the Circleville Letter Writer. And this was somebody who would send anonymous letters out to people in the town of Circleville. And I took that and created the plot for my book, Murder in the Heart of It All. And it came out really well. It was great. So that's a good example of, pop culture influencing, my writing.
Hey, Jess.
So my novel ideas come from just like really random little snippets of things that interest me. I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't have files of like fully formed stories I might write one day, but I have just these little scraps of things that interest me, which often are an article, something in the news, something I keep noticing in pulp culture. A Million Reasons Why starts when two strangers are linked by one of those mail-in DNA test kits as sisters, which is something that you've been hearing a lot about happening to people in real life. So often it is something like that I'll just find myself gravitating toward, interested by those stories, and then decide that I want to kind of reimagine my own take on it.
So you're talking about like the genetic test, like the 23andMe?
Yes, like a 23andMe, exactly. So I noticed when people take those tests, either some people do take them looking for something. Maybe they're an adopted child, or, in the case of my book, it's two grown women leaving totally separate lives in totally separate states. One of them knew she never knew her father. So she took the test knowing that there was a possibility she had more family out there that she could be linked with. And the other one just took it on a lark as a Christmas present, like I think a lot of people do, just to find out, what percent Irish they were, and had no notion that it would open a can of worms and kind of blindside her. So I noticed that in real life, those are kind of the two camps that people fall into when they have an unexpected result from one of these tests. And so that became the premise for my novel.
Nice, absolutely. My sister is always trying to get me to take one of those. I'm like, no, I'd rather not know these things at all. How about you, Kylie? Does any pop culture factor into your writing?
Me? You can't get away from it. Like Jessica said, no, really, because pop culture is all around us. So like Jessica said, you'll hear a little snippet of something on the news, or you'll see something when there used to be newspapers. Remember those?
Yeah.
You see something on TV and it sparks an idea, and it may not be exactly what you saw, but it sends your mind in different places because it's all around us. This is life, and that's how it works.
I remember the days of having paper newspapers. It's like now they're far and few between. Everything's just online at the drop of a .com. So I completely understand that. So my next question is, although this is probably a question for prior to pandemic times, that some people have a preference in writing either in a coffee shop or a small library space versus a dungeon, which they find in the basement of a house that they may or may not own. So my question to each of you, and each of you can take a turn to answer this, what is your writing setting usually for yourself? Not necessarily where you're writing the setting that takes place in your book, but for yourself. Do you prefer more of a public space like a library or a coffee shop, or do you prefer more of an isolated area?
I work at home and do all of my writing at my desk. Although if I am out in the public and I have an idea, maybe a line of dialogue or a question or a good description comes to mind, I'll certainly sit down and jot that down on my phone and then pick it up later when I write at my desk. But I'm not good at handling distractions when I write. I greatly envy those of you who are able to listen to music while they're writing. And I know some writers have playlists to go with a certain book to set a mood. And I can't do that because I love writing. I love music. If music is playing, I just want to close my eyes and listen to it. And when I'm writing, I just want to shut everything else out and lose myself in the work. So,
yeah.
I'm with Steve. I work at home. I'm probably the only writer left on earth who does not own a laptop or a notebook. I have a desktop system, which is why I couldn't put the little thing on that you asked us to, Daniel, because I can't move my monitor. So there's my website there, Mystery.
Oh, if you could pull it up, move it closer for us.
If I put it here, it looks like I just got arrested. But I like Steve, I envy people who can actually write in other places. It's too much noise for me. I have plenty of friends who call Panera the office. I don't know how they do it. And it has to be quiet, no music, no distractions.
Oh, wow. Mike?
What you see right here, this is my dungeon. This is where I write. But as far as distractions go, I almost need it. I very much have my manuscript open on one side of the monitor, and on the other side, I'll have YouTube up, and it's either playing music or it's playing how-to videos,
Wow.
something that can kind of distract me a little bit. I know it's kind of weird, but that's the process I've gotten into.
So for the how-to videos, are they like related to whatever you're writing, or is it just completely random? Like how to bake a cake, unless you're talking about a murdering cake, I guess.
Yeah, they can be that. A lot of it's just, furniture restoration or, DIY stuff for your house, anything that just kind of numbing, that you can just kind of look in on once in a while. So it just keeps things flowing for me.
Janet?
Well, I'm with Kylie. I work on a desktop. I don't use the iPad or a tablet because it's not large enough for me. I kind of need this big screen to go along with my big ideas that I'm trying to develop. But this is my dungeon. The books are my inspiration. I have this fanciful idea that all those great authors behind me are speaking to me and encouraging me and saying, you can do this, you can do this. So it's kind of nice. I have a lot of little sayings up there. Irma Bombeck's, if you want to write, just do it. And all kinds of other little things that are inspirational for me. But one thing I do when I travel, once upon a time we used to travel, I keep extensive journals on my travels. I have found that even moving to a place, say for a writer's conference, inspires me in ways that I didn't expect. And so I have all these little journals up here with the same thing that you mentioned, that you keep lines of dialogue or ideas for topics to consider or titles even. And then I know that I have that background there. So when I wrote about In a Principle of Light, takes place in the nation of Turkey and also has a section in Greece. So when I was in Greece, I took all of these notes so that when I got to that part, I could do it as accurately as possible.
Nice. That's awesome. I like the idea of kind of keeping a journal with you so you can write down the random ideas and thoughts. So Jess, how about you? Where's your writing place of choice?
So I'm kind of a hybrid writer. I do prefer to be in my office at home, and I prefer for it to be quiet when I'm, especially when I'm really in the thick of a first draft. It might not bother me as much during revision, but however, I'm a working mom with 2 young elementary aged kids, and my work days have gotten even shorter this year with a combination of remote schooling and now driving my kids to school so they don't have the contact tracing situation on the school bus. And so I've always really been able to, I'm not too particular about it. I am at soccer practice with my laptop writing while my kid is playing soccer. I'm at the dance studio writing while my daughter is doing ballet. I've always kind of been, I've had to really take those moments where I can get them. So while I do prefer to be at home, I can do it anywhere. I've kind of learned to do it anywhere. And once in a while, if I'm getting stuck, a change of scenery can be nice. I might, if the story is just starting to drag and you have those moments where you're kind of boring yourself and you're thinking, okay, I need to shake this up a little bit. In pre-pandemic times, sometimes I would go to a coffee shop but I have, because of my young kids, I asked for a Christmas gift of some really nice high-end noise canceling headphones a couple of years ago. So I will take those with me and then kind of can get a change of scenery, but not be too distracted by what's going on around me, which is a nice compromise. But I have to laugh, Dan, because when you kind of sent bullet points of what we'd be talking about today in advance, and one of the bullet points just said dungeon or coffee shop, and I had no idea what that was in reference to, but every single person here said dungeon, so I guess that's what you get on a mystery writers panel.
Mystery questions as well. Thank you very much, Jeff. Steve and Jenny, you kind of touched on this, and I'd like to hear from the other authors. What do you do when you're out and about and the muse just randomly strikes you? You have an idea or thought of inspiration. You might not have your laptop with you, or you might not have your desktop with you. So what do you do in that situation?
Well,
And Mike, we can start with, oh, sorry, Jen.
the first thing
Hey,
you
Kylie,
do
sorry.
is tell yourself you're never going to forget this idea because it's so good. And the second thing you do is forget it.
Yes, 1000%.
Yes.
Do you carry around any type of notebook or journal with you, or you just let it get back to the wind?
I don't. I guess I count on the brain. I'm not sure it works anymore, but I count on it.
Thank you, Kylie. How about you, Mike?
I have a notepad file on my phone just full of ideas, full of dialogues, lines that I think we'll be able to, or I'll be able to use someday. So that's how I do it.
I like it. I like it. And Jeff?
Sometimes I'll dictate into my phone if there's something for me about doing something mindless, like taking a walk or being on a bike ride, that sometimes will trigger something. And so if I don't have anything with me, sometimes I'll like dictate into my phone so I don't forget it. But like Kylie said, it's very often like 3 a.m. and you've just woken up and you're like, oh, I'll remember that in the morning, or you're in the shower. So I'll remember this when I'm out. And yeah, you're really not going to remember it.
No.
You need to write it
you're
down.
just getting it back.
You need to, yeah, just get your whole bathroom wet jumping out of the shower to write that down.
And next thing you know, you slip and you fall, and then you definitely forget the ideas. You're on your way to the emergency room or something.
Yes,
which could
exactly.
be the plot of a nice thriller mystery there. So there's that.
I won't steal it. I'll let you keep that one.
Oh, thank you very much. So that kind of segues into our next topic of discussions. You all are accomplished authors when it comes to mysteries, thrillers, and suspense novels. So my question to each of you is, what is the most challenging part about writing mysteries, suspenses, and thrillers as opposed to other genres? And Steve, we can start with you.
I think one of the challenging things for me anyway is I like to put the clues out there for the reader at the same time my characters get them. You know, I don't want to hide anything, but there's a thin line between putting the clues out there and making things too obvious and making things not quite obvious enough. You know, if you do it right, the reader gets to the end and everything comes together and they think, oh, I should have seen that. If you can achieve that feeling, then you're getting it. If you get to the end and say, yeah, I knew it, then you telegraph too much. If they get to the end and say, no, this isn't coming together, you know, it's not working. So for me, that's the tricky part. And I'm not saying that I always get there either. You know, that's my goal, and I hope I'm getting there. But that's always in the back of my mind. Am I putting too many clues out there? Am I making them too obvious? Is it not obvious enough? How could anyone not figure this out? You know, it's a challenge.
Nice. How about you, Janet?
Well, I love to read, and I think that's a sign really of all writers, that we love books, we love to read. And I read pretty wide spectrum of things, but not much nonfiction. I read fiction. And there are some things that I like myself to read. Of course, I love a mystery. I like, Steve, to be intrigued by, am I picking out the right clues? Am I following the breadcrumbs kind of thing? But I also like suspense and surprise. And those are a little bit different in how you present them. And honestly, I like a little bit of romance. So I like the fact that there's just this little bit of attraction between characters that occurs. So when I write, those are the 4 elements that I try to put in a general way, and then develop a story that has enough meat on its bones to carry those things through.
Jenny, you brought up a very good point, and I think a lot of people that are going to be watching and attending this the book festival, sometimes they kind of lump together mysteries and suspense. So I guess for anyone, before we kind of go back to that question, Janet, what's the biggest difference in your opinion between a mystery novel and a suspense novel?
Well, you know, Alfred Hitchcock did a much better job of defining this when they had a discussion and about movies and how do you do that in a movie? And the idea of suspense is that the reader may know, but the characters don't know. And it's that idea of you go into the movie theater, and I'm sure you've all been in a movie theater when people are yelling at the screen, no, don't go in there. Don't open that door. That's the idea of setting up that suspense for your characters. And if you do it well enough in a novel, I think your readers are doing the same thing too. They're saying, oh no, I hope he or she doesn't make that choice. But of course they do, because that gives the story the impetus to continue.
Yes, a little bit of pain for your, yes. So Jess, how about you? What is the biggest challenge for writing any type of mystery, suspense, or thrillers?
I think Steve hit on it pretty well. The thing is that you have to play fair. So you want to withhold the right amount of information so that the reader cannot guess the ending, but the ability for them to guess it, the tools for them to guess it have to kind of be in there. You know, you can't make them feel tricked. You can't, in the last scene of the novel, be like, oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you this protagonist actually has a black belt. And now she's gonna, you know, everything that's gonna come into play in the conclusion of the story needs to be in there, however subtly. So I think it's that you have to play fair and make sure that the groundwork is in there, but you're not withholding too much.
I like the idea of making sure you don't have unfair surprises for your readers, because you don't want them to feel cheated or some type of Deus ex machina mechanism coming in to save the day. So I think that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Kylie, how about you? What's the hardest part of writing mystery, thrillers, or suspense novels?
I agree with what everybody else says. But I also think the hardest part, at least for me, is a mystery is really two stories. Mystery is what your protagonist, your sleuth, your detective, your cop, whoever is doing here. But you've got your guilty person having a story too under here. And that second story, that understory, may not ever appear in your book, but you got to know what's going on. You know, my heroine is out to dinner having pizza at a really nice restaurant. Really nice restaurants serve pizza, whatever. Where is my killer? What has my killer done lately to make sure she doesn't get caught? So it's keeping all that going. And for me personally, timelines. Does anybody else get trouble with timelines? It makes you insane. What day is it? What? Where did the week go? You know? So, and that's another whole thing. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with mystery, but I always have trouble with that.
So Kylie, you touched on a very interesting point, and I kind of want to follow up on it. Timelines and kind of having knowledge of what your killer is doing, although it might not make it in the story. So how does one accomplish that? Do you have like a detailed outline, or is it just kind of plot by plot versus bullet point? How do you make sure you kind of have that fleshed out 3D world?
Is that for me? I outline. I'm one of those plotter people. I may not always, I know I don't always have every single thing. I just started a new book and I've got a 33-page outline. It's just bullet points. So it may say, you know, chapter 3, heroine meets Grambling. We may not know what they say to each other. I may not know. It may not say that, but I know it has to happen. So that helps me keep track of things. And then, like I said, timelines. I have also started lately in big bold letters saying chapter 3, Tuesday, chapter 4, Wednesday, because it's just, it just all slips away.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else kind of use a bullet point outline style just by show of hands or nods?
Oh, I definitely do. After my first couple books, it was difficult, so I became much more organized when I wrote my, Lost Little Sister, and I actually used a resource called Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and it's got great explanations for genres, and it's got great explanations for how you can create your outlines, and as you move through the novel, what your character can be doing to grow and to change. And it was a great resource for me.
Nice. I definitely have heard of Save the Cat before, and it definitely is a good writing style. Does anyone else have any other different outline structures that they use to help outline their novels?
I use just a very basic outline, and I give myself permission to deviate from it if things develop later on. Kylie was talking about what your killer's doing in the background and all that, and I think it's a very important point to keep in mind too. After I write a chapter, I look at the events of that chapter from the vantage of the other characters, whether they're in the scene or not, and I ask myself, okay, what do the events revealed in this chapter, how does it affect the other people? How would they react to it? Will it change their plans? Will it change their goals? And sometimes that forces me to think, oh, wow, I had no idea that this minor character was going to suddenly become a big part of this story, or become a big obstacle to my protagonist because their goals differ from the protagonist's goals. So that I have that outline, but if the events of the story and the goals of the characters turn out to be different from what's on my outline, well, I tear that thing up, throw it away, and make a new outline.
Well, I'm a pantser.
I was hoping there's at least one.
Although I absolutely agree with Kylie about timelines, and that is one of the huge things I do in revisions, is constantly checking that timeline. And do I have the dates right? Do I have the days right? Are the hours even right that you've got? And that's a huge challenge, but I always know where I'm going to start and almost always know where this ends. But it's kind of like taking a road trip without the map, in that I just get on the back roads and I just keep going and see. And then of course, that wonderful, I've grown to love revision like many people. You get to change and rearrange and correct as you're going through, which it actually becomes one of the joys of doing a novel, is having that ability to go back and make those adjustments. But yeah, I'm pretty much, I don't outline.
So Jess, we have to ask you, what's your preferred style?
Yeah, I'm actually sort of a hybrid of the two. I'm the one hybrid person. So I don't have an outline, but I do have a synopsis, which has all of those story beats worked out. And I'm also not Kylie's process. I'm so in awe of being able to work all that out in advance, which is part of why I'm not a strict mystery writer. My books are more contemporary fiction that have strong elements of suspense. So mine are kind of cross-categorized between suspense and just contemporary or mainstream fiction, or sometimes women's fiction. But I usually have a pretty big twist. And I know the twist in advance. And I find it very helpful to write toward that, even if I don't know how all the other elements are going to come together. So I think the heart of the story is intact before I start, but then I still have that free range, as Jan was saying, to kind of, if a character it sounds so woo-woo to say, but if a character wants to do something or kind of surprises me, I can follow that direction.
Oh, but they do.
But they do, yes. But I don't need to check and see if my timeline is correct or not when I'm done, because I am 100% sure that it is wrong. It is always wrong. It is the one thing that I always need to fix. And every time I'm like, when are you going to learn, Strawser? When are you going to learn to work this out in advance? And I'm not going to learn, Dan. I'm never going to learn.
As long as you're open
figure
and
it
honest
out.
with yourself, that's all that matters. Open and honest with yourself.
Yes, exactly. I would never give anyone advice on how to do that, because I cannot do it. But I fix it in revision.
Revisions is where things get fixed?
Yes, it's where it gets fixed. Yeah,
So
and
just
because my
added-
books aren't straight mysteries, sometimes there's a killer, sometimes there's not. This one doesn't have a killer. The timeline's not always important in that sort of the way it would be to a detective novel. So I can fudge it in that ways. But yes, I often have 9-day weeks, and it's not good.
Like 90 weeks?
9-day weeks. Like, oh, this week has been going on for an awful long time. Maybe I should count the date. Yeah, it's just.
I apologize. I thought you said 90 weeks. I was like, oh my,
90
that's
weeks.
a big time span. There
That
we go.
would be, yeah, that would be too long. That novel would never end.
It would take 90 weeks to end, just, a long time. So my next question, whoever wants to answer first can definitely feel free to do it. Ohio is no stranger to the opioid epidemic, same thing with gun violence, and sometimes more in this genre, more than other genres, usually touch on those types of substance abuse issues. So how has that kind of informed your writing, or have you incorporated that into your own novels?
In this one, which comes out in a bookstore near you in July, I actually have a scene that plays right into that. My main character is a sheriff's detective, and the plot of the novel, I don't want to give too much away, but there's a main case he's very concerned about, but because he's a working public servant, there are other jobs he has to do as well that take away time from that. And one of the things that gets in the way of him finding this missing girl is a person who's overdosed on a sidewalk, lying on the ground. And he and other detectives and the paramedics all come rushing in, grab Narcan out of their vehicles, and have to save this person. And of course, this draws a crowd, and people in the crowd are expressing various opinions. There's some who are like, why are we bothering to save this person? Because, they brought their own problems on themselves. My character has a bad negative reaction to that opinion because, it's his job to help people, and that's why we're doing it. But yeah, so those kind of problems, they do come into your plots, and they do affect your story, because you want your book to feel like the real world. And that's a very big part of what this book really is about, is my guy trying to cope with the real world and trying to make it the way he wants it to be. So.
Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I'll tackle that. In my mystery series, it's set in Northeast Ohio. It's set in a small town, and the opioid epidemic, is constantly in the background, and it kind of overshadows everything. So even though it doesn't play directly into the plot, what happens is it starts to overwhelm the police, because we have a detective who's trying to solve something, and he's got a stack of, folders on his desk that are just crimes that all have to do with, houses broken into, by somebody who's feeding a heroin habit, or it's just overwhelming him to the point where my protagonist is actually a small town newspaper reporter, and he's actually able to solve crimes because he's kind of unencumbered by all this other stuff that's going on that the police have to deal with on a day-by-day basis. So that's how I kind of incorporated it into, and writing about crime in Northeast Ohio, I had to make sure that was in the story, because it really doesn't overwhelm everything that happens here.
Thank you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else like to add on? Okay.
Well, I could say real quick that actually the novel revision that I worked on today, an Ohio girl is jilted and jobless, and she goes to the Adirondacks. And part of she finds herself in the middle of a murder investigation, and she becomes a suspect. But the opioid problem with distribution of the pills does enter into the mystery. And so I was really surprised when I saw that was going to be one of our questions, like, wow. But the fact that this intrudes into all of life, small town, like Mike said, as well as our big cities, it means we can't ignore it when we're writing.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of a similar question on that, when writing your novels in whatever genres that you're writing in, sometimes you have the opportunity of including too much it might be a bit gratuitous, and you don't want to necessarily turn off a potential reader. So how do you go about making sure you tell the story that you want to tell while making sure you're not kind of offending any potential readers with, I guess, surprise scenes and things? So what are some tips and strategies that you employ?
In terms of violence, I have two different approaches, really. The City Problems, the book we're talking about today, is set in a real world with real people. And I take sort of a detached clinical approach to the violence. I don't describe gore at length or anything like that, but I just try to have cops talk to one another about it in the kind of terms that they normally would use. I don't flinch away from it, but I definitely don't dwell on it or draw it out. My other books, of which this is the latest in stores now, Pieces of Eight. This is the fourth book in my Spider John historical mysteries featuring pirates. In those books, people are picking up a book featuring pirates. I think my readers of those are expecting a little bit more violence, a little bit more over the top action. So I go into a little bit more detail in those books, but I think it all depends on the kind of story you're telling and what you're trying to do. I don't think there's one approach that fits all.
Thank you, Steve. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, so my next question, and Jess, this is for you. So whether within a series or within an individual book, what are some steps that you have to take to ensure that your protagonist kind of develops over time to make sure that they're different from they were in the beginning than they are at the end?
So for me, the protagonist growing over the course of the story is one of the things that I have figured out in advance. So when I'm doing that synopsis, it's usually about like 5 pages, single space. And it is sort of a save the cat type of approach. Save the cat is what screenwriters use and movie writers. And it is sort of that approach where you're hitting the beats and what the character is going to go through and how they're going to change. For me, what's interesting is that I often have sort of more than one protagonist. So in A Million Reasons Why, since this is about 2 half-sisters who have just been linked by this DNA test, whose lives have just been upended, it alternates back and forth between the 2 sisters. I was thinking of it very literally as 2 halves of one story. So points of view alternate from one sister to the other, back and forth through the whole book. So I really have 2 protagonists, and they both had to complete their own arc where they would go through some character change, but also their arcs are going to intersect when they inevitably meet and affect each other. So for me, it was not just one protagonist, it was 2, but their change was really the integral thing to the story. And that was something that I had to figure out what their individual arcs were going to be, how they were going to intersect, how they were going to impact each other's arcs. For me, those are the kind of things that I need to figure out or have an idea of where that's going to go before I even start writing.
So kind of to follow up on that, when you have different viewpoints in the story, multiple POVs, do you have like separate sections of your synopsis, or are they all kind of combined together, like chapter 1, chapter 2 will be, chapter 1 will be protagonist A, chapter 2 will be protagonist B, and alternated that manner?
It's one combined together because that's how the book is going to be. So it needs to make sense combined together, but often to make sure that the parts that make that whole are strong enough, I will pull out and look at one at a time. But the synopsis needs to be, everything together. That's just me. Other people might do it differently.
We're going to take your answer as gospel. That's it. No one else's answer matters.
That's the right way.
There we go. Kylie, how about you? How do you ensure that your protagonists develop over time, over your different genres?
I write series, so it's very different because in book 1, or the other trick, of course, is you never are quite sure how long that series is going to go. So you do want them to change. The protagonist in The Secrets of Bones, this is the 2nd book in the series. The 3rd book comes out this spring. You hope she's not the same person she was in the 1st book. But I always remember I did a 10-book series writing as Casey Daniels a few years ago. And I had some readers very upset because in book number 1, the main character, the protagonist, was very shallow. Yeah, people, because we want her to change over the course of these books. But not every reader wants that. They want this fully formed character. So those, there's some questions you have to ask yourself. How big of a transformation do you want? And like I said, if you're never sure how long your series is going to go, you're doing a little dance there.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting too, because I mean, you can have a 5 or 6 book series, and it's different than like a trilogy, like a typical like YA trilogy, because in that you kind of have like an end point. So in the series, I guess you really don't know when the end is going to be. Are there ever like any thoughts of like, okay, this is going to be the last book in this person's story, so you can kind of move on, or is that part never happened?
I'm never going to let it end if I can help it. Right on going. And I think Kylie hit on a good point too, especially with a series. People come back to a series to see their old friends. They want to see Nero, Wolf, and Archie argue with each other and bicker with each other, and they want some things to remain the same. Fritz is going to bring beer when Nero rings the bell or whatever. But your characters have to grow over time as well. I find that in my series, the protagonist has his own goals, but through the course of the books, and this goes for the books I'm writing now with the detective and the pirates, both of my protagonists, they meet people along the way. They have shared adventures, they have common cause, they form bonds, and those bonds eventually start to compete with whatever goals my protagonist had in the beginning. Well, now I've made these friends and they've had my back when I needed it. Now they need me, even though I'd maybe want to be over here doing something else. So you can grow during a series and still stay true to the primary gut level things that make your character who he or she is. But yeah, it's a fine balance, I think.
Well, Mike or Janet, did you have anything to add as well, as far as ensuring that your protagonist grows over time, whether within one book or throughout a series?
I think it has to. I'm a couple books into my first, mystery series here, and you want things to remain comfortable and people can come back and kind of know those people, like Steve said, visiting an old friend. But they also have to change, because that's what happens to people in life. Events happen in their life, good and bad, and people react and change to those. And I think you have to be fair and true and let your characters grow, when those things happen to them.
I tried something in A Principle of Light that I hadn't done before. I have 2 characters, and one of the themes is about how friendship develops. The 2 women meet because they both are at the site of a bombing in Istanbul. And they are both artists, but in different mediums. So we have a photographer and we have a poet. The poet's chapters are in 3rd person to kind of reflect the way that she writes about her world. She is a widowed Turkish poet, and her poems have been judged subversive by the current administration. And so she has some very different things going on in her world. The American photographer, then I decided her chapters would be from the 1st person, because the idea of the eye of the camera, and maybe that's being a little too woo-woo, I don't know, but I think that it worked for that. Now I'm taking a character from my very first book, The Dark End of the Rainbow, and I'm attempting a series. So all of you who have done series, I may be contacting you for some advice, but I think it will be interesting then. The good thing about it is then, when in the first book, the character was 16, in the follow-up, she's going to be 19 and going to Sinclair Community College to get her degree in criminology. So I think I envision a number of books for her that can follow her trajectory by her age, as well as by her progression through her profession. At least that's my hope.
I like it. I like it. And definitely feel free to network with one another. I think that is a fantastic idea, Janet.
Absolutely.
So,
I think
Jess, you
it's-
said something. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say, I think it's interesting what Kylie said about readers complaining that the character was too flawed at the start of the series. I think that is almost a case of readers not knowing what they want. All characters have to be flawed. Nobody wants to read a book about perfect people. So if they're annoyed by a character's flaws, they might be thinking, gosh, why is this character so flawed? But if you had a book about perfect people making really good decisions, you would throw that book across the room. You know,
Yeah.
that would be the most boring thing, the most boring thing you've ever read.
Or
I
the
agree, having a-
Seinfeld series.
So, Jess, you touched on this earlier as far as like your book not necessarily fitting into one genre. A lot of you on this panel have books that kind of genre bend, be it from pirate ships to outer space to different countries as well. So, Jess, I want to start with you. What are some challenges that kind of go into writing across different genres, or maybe a novel that doesn't necessarily fit into one genre?
I think the challenge is finding the right audience for your work. That's always been a challenge for me because my books are cross-genre novels. Genre labels are really just marketing tools.
Yes.
That's what they are. Genre label tells the bookseller, the wonderful staff of the book loft, which of their billions of rooms to put your book in. You know, that is really what it is. That's you can tell a good story without being worried about the constraints of the genre, but where the genre comes in is how you're going to find the reader who's going to be the best audience for that story. So for me, if I'm writing, if I know something is going to be cross-categorized as suspense and women's fiction, as is often the case with mine, because domestic suspense is kind of the label that they put on a lot of these books now. I need to make sure that I'm meeting the conventions of the reader expectations in both of those genres. So the suspense readers are going to want some kind of twist, something to catch them off guard, to make them feel like you really got them. And the women's fiction readers are going to want these characters to undergo some personal growth. And they're going to expect things like family and friendship and marriage and parenthood to be addressed in the book. And my novels do both of those things, but I need to make sure I'm not doing one more heavily than the other if it's going to be categorized in both of those sections. I think genre labels can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, maybe not to this crowd. If you're writing mysteries, then great, that's where your stories go. But beyond that, there is a lot of gray area. And as a consumer, I like reading novels that are not just one thing. I like watching movies and TV shows that are not just one thing. Like Jan said, maybe there's a romantic element, you know, maybe there's some tension between two of the characters. But yeah, it's a marketing tool is what it is.
Steve, how do you go about?
Yeah, I worried about that a lot, what Jessica mentioned, more so with the pirate mysteries than with the detective novels, although there's a bit of concern there too. With the pirates, I definitely wanted to write murder mysteries. I'm a devotee of Sherlock Holmes, and I knew that was going to be a mystery. But it's also pirates, and readers are going to expect swords and guns and ships and sea battles and exotic locations. And so, you know, I worried, is it going to be too much of a murder mystery for the people who are coming for the pirates? Is it going to be too much pirates for the people who came for the murder mystery? And I do occasionally have a reader who'll say, yeah, it was a great pirate adventure, but the mystery bored me. And I'll have others who say, yeah, I like the mystery stuff, but an 8-page battle between two ships, come on. But what
Reasonable.
I have found,
There was no parrot. Where was the parrot?
Parrots and eye patches is what I was looking for.
there was a parrot, and bad things happened to the parrot.
Oh, no.
But what I have found is there's a core of readers who enjoy my books for what they are. And, you know, those are the ones I'm trying to connect with. And when I meet one of those, it's like, these are my people. The detective novel is part police procedural because my guy is a sheriff's detective, but it's also written in first person like a PI novel.
Mhm.
And by the end of the book, he's deciding to become a PI. So, maybe people who like the first person tough guy narrative of a PI novel get bored by the police details. Maybe people who like the police procedural stuff kind of wonder about the wisecracks and the first person dialogue. But I'm just trying to write my books the way I want to write them and trust that they'll find an audience. And the people who like both, I think, they're my peeps. I do like birds, by the way. I don't want anyone thinking I hate birds. My character is afraid of birds. That's one of his flaws. They scare him to death. But I personally love birds. I feed them in our yard here at home. So
separating the artist from the art, I agree. So you like birds, but your character hates them and wants to kill all birds. Okay, good to know.
He doesn't want to kill them. He just wants to stay away from them.
Okay, that works. So Mike, how about you? I know you have a couple of novels that are set in space.
Yeah.
How's that?
It's pretty good. Basically it's like a blue collar guy and he's just trying to run a business. He's a starship repossession guy. But since I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio here, I was exposed to a lot of corruption, in the government, a lot of crime, and that makes its way into the sci-fi. So he's constantly running up against people who are, double dealing him, don't want to pay him, who, corrupt government officials, that kind of thing. So, that's kind of how that slides in there and influences the writing. Even though it's a sci-fi thing, there's quite a bit of crime and corruption in there.
So Kylie, this next question is for you specifically, because I'm impressed by the number of pen names that you have. So could you tell us what went into the pen name creation and why you created them?
Let's just get one thing straight first, because my husband claims I have a social security number for each of these names. That is not true. So you say that.
For the record, that is not true.
Don't believe that. It is not true. Actually, well, I have a whole bunch of pen names, and you can find them at mysterybookseries.com. Because it depends what I'm writing. For instance, the book I keep holding up here, the Kylie, Logan, the Jazz Ramsey mysteries are traditional mysteries. They're not bloody, they're not gory, but they are realistic. They take place in Cleveland. Excuse me, my heroine trains and handles cadaver dogs. So they are not light and funny. But I also write cozy mysteries. Lucy Ness. She had this one out last year. A new one comes out next week. And these are light and funny. So if you see that same name, if you see Lucy Ness on a book, you're expecting light and funny, and then it's serious. So that's pretty much why I use different names. I used to be Casey Daniels. I may be her again someday. I liked Casey. She wrote books that featured a woman who worked in a Cleveland cemetery, and she solved mysteries for the ghosts in the cemetery. And then I came up with an idea for a straight mystery, and my publisher didn't want the Casey Daniels name on it because there were no ghosts in it. So it just all depends on what I'm writing or who I'm hiding from, depending.
Well, hopefully the person that you're hiding from is not watching this broadcast with me made widely available to everyone. All right, so the last question I have for you all has to go with our actual writers out there, for any potential writers out there that might be watching this video thinking to themselves, I want to be where they are one day and attend the Ohioana Library Festival book panel. So what is a top 5 pieces of advice that you can give to a potential writer out there? Just one in your top 5. I was going to ask for your top 1, but I know it'd be hard to kind of figure out the number 1. So just a top 5 pieces of advice. And Jess, we can start with you.
I think you need to be bullheaded and flexible at the same time, which sound like 2 different things, but they're not. You need to be willing to take good feedback that resonates and apply that feedback and, be there to learn and learn to get better. And if you're continually collecting rejections, on a piece of work, you need to ask yourself why it's not there yet and do what work needs to be done to either get it there or to set it aside and write something new. But you also need to be really bullheaded. You need to be really persistent. I think persistence will get you about as far as talent in this business. You really just have to keep at it. And there have been so many downsides, obviously, to the pandemic this year. It's been a really difficult year. A lot of people are struggling. However, it's, as with anything else in life, you really want to try to find the upsides. And I think right now there are resources to help aspiring or emerging writers get better have never been so easily accessible. I mean, this is the perfect example. You used to have to drive to the Columbus Library and, you know, sit in a room and attend a panel if you wanted to see discussions like this. Now it's online for free. Anybody can be watching this. There is so much, I mean, you don't have to wait for your favorite author to come to your town when they release a new book. You can log on and watch their talk at Cuyahoga Public Library or hosted by some bookstore in New York City or Arizona. So I think really information has never been so accessible as it is right now to aspiring writers. So whatever resources you need to help you get better are out there to be taken advantage of right now.
Thank you, Jess. How about you, Janet? What is a top 5 piece of advice that you would give a future writer?
Well, Jess said some really good things about being bullheaded and persistent, but for me, I would say, put your butt in the chair and persevere. That you can't just talk about it or think about it. You have to put the work in, and it's time and it's effort. So that's where it starts, in your chair, wherever that chair is. If it's in a coffee house, great. If it's in a dungeon, that's fine too.
Thank you, Janet. How about you, Mike?
I think Janet and Jessica have great ideas here. You have to sit down, you have to put the words on the paper, because the worst first draft in the world is better than the idea that somebody has floating around in their head. And when you sit down and when you start to put the words on paper, that's when you start to find out all the things you don't know. And then that's where you're going to start to look for those resources that Jessica talked about to see how you overcome the problems that you run into. Because until you do it, you don't know what you don't know.
Thank you, Mike. Kylie?
I'm really bad at math, so I'm not going to give you 5 things. I think it's very important for writers and for people who want to be published to remember that this is a business. This is not art that falls down from the sky and invades your head and you go into a trance and you write. This is work. This is a business. It also means you have to be up on what publishers want. You could write the greatest, I'm picking an idea out of the air, maybe it is something they want. You could write the greatest zombie book in the world, but if nobody's buying zombies, you're wasting your time. So you really have to keep your ear to the ground, know what's going on, and like I said, know it's a business. You're getting rejected. They're not stealing your firstborn, even though there are times you may want them to. They are making business decisions, and you have to be savvy and know what you're doing and know what they're doing.
Thank you, Kylie. And Steve?
I think the key thing is to find your own voice as an author and trust it. You may love Stephen King. I like reading Stephen King, but I never try to sound like Stephen King when I'm writing a book. I don't want to try to duplicate what J.K. Rowling does. I'd love to have her money and success, but I'm not going to sit down and try to write like J.K. Rowling, because I can't. I think instead of worrying about chasing trends and being the next Stephen King or the next J.K. Rowling, be the first whoever you are. Be the first Jessica Strawser. Be the first Kylie Logan, Janet Irvin, Mike Prelee. Just do your thing and trust that you're going to find an audience out there. You can tell when somebody's trying to sound like John D. McDonald or Mark Twain or whatever. Be yourself and trust it.
And if you can all hold up your books and your social media plugs for me, that'd be great. I just want to thank you again to our panelists. We have Steve, we have Mike, Kylie, Janet, and Jess. A reminder, you can get copies of these books by going online or going to the book loft at German Village at bookloft.com. Thanks again to the festival sponsors and partners, and thank you for joining us. Please check out our Ohioana website for all this year's programming and this year's festival programming. Thank you all and have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank